Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 954. I had the white pieces and started off with e4. My opponent went e5, and we get into a classical Ruy Lopez in a couple of moves here. All very logical moves, attacking the center, defending it, and then putting some pressure on the knight. And he plays the somewhat rare continuation d6, the Steinitz defense, or the old Steinitz defense it's sometimes called, because there is a modern variation of it where you push a6 first, bishop goes back, and then you play d6. And this is actually a little more popular, gives black a few more options to kick this bishop around if he wants to break the pin. So probably a better way of playing than the immediate d6. But I have not ever found anything great against this opening. So it's supposed to be a little bit on the cramped side for black. You can see in the game I developed some space, but black got some counterattack. Anyway, let's go forward. So d4 is the main line, just trying to grab that extra space, taking advantage of the pin, and then black usually unpins. And now the move I played, d5, is a bit unusual. So let's show the main line first. So the main line continues knight c3, just developing and holding on to the center. And black develops, and white castles. The funny thing about this is there's this constant tension over here, and you never know at any moment white can choose to take or black can choose to take. But let's just follow the main line for a bit. Black normally goes bishop e7, white goes rook e1, so all solid developing moves. And then finally black takes, bringing another knight in to the center and putting more pressure here. But, well, that knight can, of course, be traded off. Knight takes d4 is an option, but once again, black maintains the tension here. And then finally, at this moment, white decides to take. So this is why I have trouble with the main line. I can never remember exactly when you're supposed to take that knight on c6, and why this is good to take at this particular moment, and why should you take with the bishop instead of the knight. It all just doesn't make much sense to me, and I don't think white gets much of an advantage. In fact, you can see the second choice here is actually retreating the bishop back to f1 and keeping the bishop on, which has some sense. I mean, this is a good piece. Why trade it off for a knight? So anyway, I didn't play the main line. I've tried to play that many a time. And at this point, I think I'm just giving up with it, giving up on the main line and trying something different. Now, d5 is a move I've played before. And you can see it's still in the database here. It's not very popular, but it has a pretty simple idea. The knight has to move, and then you trade off this light squared bishop. You just get rid of it. I mean, like I said, your light squared bishop is a good piece, but, well, you've just locked up the center, and so technically speaking, that's your bad bishop, and that was black's good bishop. So the remaining bishop that black has is this bishop on f8, which is going to be blocked in by the pawn chain, as long as you can maintain this this central pawn formation, which is why I played c4 right away. So you can think of this as kind of a French defense, except the pawns are in the wrong direction. In the French defense, the black pawns would be here and here, and the white pawns would be here and here. But anyway, that was actually kind of the idea I had when I first played that. I said, well, why don't I play this like a French defense, but with the pawn chain reversed. Anyway, so I went ahead and played c4 here, and we're just out of the book. Of course, you can see that it's a very narrow section of the opening book. So I think c4 is still a fine move. And the chess engine actually likes d5 for what it's worth. It thinks that's a reasonable way to play there. Let's see. So he continued with knight g6. I go knight c3, and now he goes a6. This is a slightly bad move, not a huge mistake, but the chess engine wants to immediately work to undermine the center with c6, and I think black needs to play actively. Again, think of the French defense where you're always playing f6 to undermine the pawn chain that's going in this direction. So now you have the opposite pawn chain. You want to play c6 and undermine it. And c6 also controls the b5 square if he was worried about a knight coming into b5. I mean, that's the only reason I can think of why he'd play a6. Well, actually, there's another reason. He might be preparing b5 to undermine the center. It's another way to undermine, but it's a bit slower. It takes an extra step, and you have to play b5 and f5 to undermine it. But I suppose that could be a plan. But I think c6, the more direct plan, is the correct move there. Anyway, he went a6, and now I have a pretty noticeable advantage. Although bishop e3 is maybe not the strongest, but anyway, after knight f4, the chess engine says I should just win this game. So that's the difference between chess engines and people. You know, a chess engine can look at this and say, well, white is just winning. But it was a little scary for me, honestly, in the game. I could not tell that I was winning. But what should black play instead? He could play knight f6 here for the moment, giving up on this f5 plan, but just developing. I would castle. He would play bishop e7. He'd get castled himself. And he has a cramped position, so white has more space, but there's nothing wrong with it. He has no defects in his position, so it's not like there's an easy breakthrough for white here. So certainly that should still be playable for black. Anyway, so knight f4, white should win at this point. And taking is the right answer. If you wait for a moment, maybe black can get in the move g5. That knight will be solidly cemented there, and then maybe g5 can be followed up with g4 at some point to launch a pawn storm. And in the meanwhile, he can also castle on the king side. So yeah, I think you need to do something about this knight right away. So I took it off. And it leaves him with doubled pawns, and it leaves me with the idea of pushing the e-pawn forward, especially while his king is in the center. So I went ahead and castled right here so I could put my rook behind the e-pawn. And it seems like he decided to go or play in a way that would allow kingside castling. So I went bishop e7. He could have just castled queenside immediately. Certainly I would be tempted to do that. But, well, there's another point here. Let's get to it. Rook e1. And here, g5, continuing with the pawn storm, seems to be a further mistake. To get the best out of this position, Chess Engine is recommending knight h6, which is a very interesting move. You often don't play knight h6 because there's a dark squared bishop here that will just trade it off. So you don't see this move too often. But there's no dark squared bishop. That bishop has been traded off now. And on h6, the knight will support a pawn coming to f5. And so that's another way to chip away at the center. And black could even castle kingside here, put a rook behind the f-pawn, and then play f5. Might be a way of getting some counterplay, but the chess engine still thinks that white is better here. But anyway, that would be best chances for black. He went with g5. And I just counterpunched with e5. He went on with g4. And now's when things get really exciting. Well, I noticed that I could get in this e6 move, and I thought that would be useful. And the chess engine approves because, well, it's a bigger threat. So he can take and I take, but eventually he has to move the queen. And now I really should just move my knight. I was looking for something interesting here, and I came up with this queen d4 idea. But actually, knight d4 is better. Just save the knight. He can play queen takes c4. That's what I didn't like about this line. I wasn't sure about, you know, the fact that this knight is a bit loose here. You can put bishop here. But apparently, I just have to play rook to c1, and things are okay. Yeah, the chess engine likes white a lot here. That maybe the threats against the queen gain some more tempo, and this bishop move, I just can move my knight out of the way at that point. So anyway, that's why I was afraid of just simply moving the knight, and why I shouldn't have been afraid. So I went in for this very tricky line, queen d4. And I thought he would play bishop to f6 here, which I think still is the best move here, or at least the best try. And the idea is now, well, the bishop is supported by the knight, so he's attacking my queen, and my rook is hanging. So I've got two pieces hanging, but my plan was to take on f4. And the chess engine thinks this is still okay for white. Even after I lose a piece here, I can continue with knight d5 and have some small edge. The chess engine thinks actually the best move here which I hadn't thought about. But we didn't get to this point in the game, but I just calculated ahead and planned to play knight d4. The chess engine says I should play e7 here. A very interesting move. Basically, this just prevents black from castling as long as that pawn lives there. And if he takes with the knight here, then I can grab the bishop here, hitting the rook, and he's in big trouble. Or if he takes with the bishop, then I can just play knight d5, and I can just pile up on that pinned piece. And once again, he's in big trouble. He can never castle without losing a piece there. So e7 is the simplest way to win from this position. But just to continue with what I was thinking, I was planning to play knight d5 there. And then I thought, well, the pressure here, and when it moves, I can get my queen into f7. Thought that should be enough compensation for the piece. But the chess engine is not so impressed with this line. It would just give the piece back. It would castle, queenside, get the king out of trouble. So a very logical play. I take off the bishop. Excuse me. He can grab a pawn here. And my king is fairly safe still, and I can push on with e7. So white is still a little bit better here, but but you can see the material is even. The king has gotten a little bit of safety, and maybe he can just stop the pawn at this point. It's hard for me to make a whole lot of progress here. So a slight edge to white, but maybe not a simple win at this point. So that's one of the ways that bishop f6 might have turned out, especially if I hadn't noticed this e7 move or didn't play it in time. But instead he went with knight f6, which also the chess engine lists as one of the better tries here. So not an unreasonable idea. And but it did allow me to play knight g5, and I was feeling pretty good because now I'm not sacrificing material, and I'm holding on to this pawn and have the knight coming into f7 potentially. Let's see, he played rook g8 and went ahead with knight to f7, but even stronger was queen takes f4. Just that idea I had from the previous line, that f-pawn is loose, why not get rid of it, and at the same time defend the knight. That's just stronger. So knight f7, I think he has a few chances still after this. He played rook to g7, putting pressure on my knight. I played knight d5, bring another piece in, and he plays knight to h5. Pretty interesting. Just trying to coordinate with the rook, the knight, and the queen on my king's side. Maybe if he could push the f-pawn forward, the knight could hop in here, something like that. Not quite sure actually what the knight is doing at h5, but it's kind of clearing the way a little bit. Now my queen at the moment is looking at his rook, but the knight defends the rook. So maybe that was one of his ideas, was put the knight on a square that defends the rook. And here I took off this bishop here. I thought it was a good defender and I would get rid of it. The chess engine does not approve. It says I should play rook a to c1. Hold on to that c-pawn, put the rook opposite the queen. Maybe I can even push the c-pawn forward and cause some trouble that way. So basically it just wants to sit on the position and get more pieces into the action. So it's a kind of move Paul Morphy would certainly approve of, and it's better than what I played. Because when I trade this off, well, I'm also getting rid of one of my attacking pieces, so that some other ideas go out the window once I've lost that knight. For example, let's back up one move. The knight may have gone to one of these squares as a possibility. But anyway, knight takes e7 is what I played. He took back, and then I played rook e4. And by now, the chess engine is saying black is almost equal again. Once again, the thing to do is to bring in my last unused piece. This rook here is just sitting idle. I should take the opportunity to bring it into the game while he can't do a whole lot. So after rook e4, I was kind of saved by the fact that he decided to sack the exchange here. So with best play, chess engine goes like this. It goes rook to g6, leaving off putting pressure on the knight, getting the rook out of the way of the queen, so now this knight is free to move, and at the same time putting pressure on the pawn. So I bring my rook over to double, and then he plays queen c5, and after the trade of queens, suddenly my advantage kind of disappears. Um, with the queens off the board, black's exposed king um, doesn't have as much value, and for me, I can't exploit it as well with the queens off the board. And apparently, there's no good way to avoid the exchange. I guess if I just retreat my queen, um, then black can defend as well. I probably would try to keep the queens on anyway, but the chess engine line involved a trade of queens, and then black was nearly equal at this point. Basically, my only remaining trump card is this pawn, which is pretty well blockaded, and it's going to be hard for me to move it forward. So I was a bit lucky at this point that he decided to give up the exchange in order to get rid of this annoying knight here. But yeah, I guess the point to realize is this knight may look annoying, but it doesn't have a lot that it can do at the moment. It's not making any threats. So black would be better off living with the knight and trading off the queens. Anyway, he took the knight, and now I have a pretty straightforward win. Let's see, he has to take, and let's see, I'd finally bring my other rook in. That's a key point, and I finally woke up to it. Let's see, he played g3 here. I just went ahead and took this. I just don't want to let him open lines here. He took back. I threw in this check, and then I played h3 here to prevent him from opening lines, like I said. So it's a kind of a cautious move, but there's actually a much better move in this position after he plays king to g8. So let's see, I just went here with check. He went king to g8. That's right, he couldn't go to h7 because the queen, or g7, the queen's covering it. So what's the best move here? You should be able to spot this one. Pause the video if you want some time to think about it. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. The best move here is simply rook check. This is a mate in two. The king has no moves. You can only block with the knight, and then the queen comes in. So, you know, and when you play Blitz, sometimes you play up moves that you calculated ahead of time just to save on time. And certainly this is still winning, but I did overlook a mate in two there. But anyway, it prevents him from opening any lines against my king. And then let's just continue forward. He brought his rook over, but I just traded it off and activated my queen this way in the corner. Yeah, it was kind of funny in the game. I originally intended to bring my queen over here, and I noticed in time that his queen was guarding that square. But it was a bit tricky, actually. That queen was guarding some good squares. I was having trouble finding correct moves. Let's see, he blockaded here. But, well, this loses the knight because of the check. And the only thing I have to worry about here is I don't get mated. If his queen were to drop back here, well, after the check, chasing my king to the corner, if the queen could get to the back rank, that would be a mate, because my rook couldn't even come back. The queen could take it off. So I do have to be careful here, but it's not, he can't get to the back rank that quickly, so I have time to take his rook. He plays the check. I go to the corner. And now a queen anywhere along the back rank here would mate me. So I do have to be careful that the queen can't get there with tempo. But let's see, can't do anything immediately. Well, he could try repositioning the queen, but instead he tried pushing on to d5. But it turns out there's nothing really that works here. And I tried going for this mate. I noticed that his king couldn't escape, and I could drive it back and bring my queen in. And then once again, I was planning this checkmate, and I noticed, oh, now his queen is guarding that square. The queen has a talent here of guarding exactly the squares that I want to cover. Now, maybe I could have continued. Probably rook here would lead to a mate that he couldn't cover. But anyway, I decided to just give up and get rid of the queen, and that was enough to win the game, because after this exchange, he resigned. Anyway, it was kind of a fun game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you again next time. Bye.